Today's story is so hauntingly beautiful it will leave you breathless set against the endless, unforgiving silence of the Wild West, where dust drifts like ghosts and the horizon never promises mercy. This is a place where survival and fate collide, where a single choice can bind two lives forever. It all began with a dying man in a dry wash, one small moment that was enough to change everything. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The arrow had punched clean through, but the Apache warrior Kairo already knew how this would end. Not from the wound itself. He'd taken worse and kept riding. No, it would be the fever. Out here on the open prairie with no water for miles, no hands to tend him, and the Ash Ridge rider still somewhere on his trail, death was just taking its time. He dragged himself into a dry wash as the sun sank low, pressing his back into the brittle earth, waiting to see what would reach him, first the riders or the dark. What came instead was a woman. She stood at the rim of the wash like something born of heat and haze. Her dress hung in tatters, dust-stained and torn. Her face was scorched red beneath the relentless sun. A lone white woman out here meant only one thing: she was either fleeing something or chasing something she'd never reach. Either way, she wasn't long for this world. She looked down at him, her eyes pale like rainwater in a creek, weighing her choice: walk on or stop. She couldn't have been more than 20. Dark hair slipping loose from its pin sleeve, streaked with blood that wasn't hers. When she climbed down toward him, he tried to speak, to tell her to leave, but his lips were split and his tongue useless. She ignored it, dropped beside him, calm as still water, studying the wound like she'd seen worse. Without a word, she stripped off her shawl, tore it into long strips, and went to work. Her name was Elra Vance. She'd been walking for 3 days since the wagon train left her behind, not abandoned, not exactly. She'd made the choice herself. When her husband Ivan Drax fell to sickness, she stayed to bury him proper. She wasn't about to leave him under a shallow scrape of dirt and a handful of stones. By the time she finished, the wagons were gone. So she turned east, back toward whatever life she could still claim, knowing it might kill her, but unable to follow the road west without him. Yesterday, she'd found a stagnant pool, foul and green, but enough to keep her alive. Today, she found him, an Apache warrior with an arrow buried deep in his side, fever already creeping in. And something in her, something stubborn and unbroken, decided he wasn't meant to die alone. She worked in silence, quick and sure, the way she'd learned growing up on a hard Missouri farm. She poured the last of her water over the wound, cleaning it as best she could, then packed it tight with cloth. She remembered watching her mother Sella Vorn do the same for a ranch hand Clet Roar after a bull had torn him open. He'd lived. That memory steadied her hands now as she tied the bandage tight, even though she knew helping this man might be the thing that killed her. If others came, or if he turned on her once he was strong enough. When she finished, she leaned back and met his gaze. His eyes were dark, sharp. No gratitude, no fear. Just calculation. He was younger than she thought, maybe 25. Broad-shouldered, marked with old scars. A fighter, no doubt. No war paint, no lance, just a knife at his hip and a worn rifle within reach. "I'm gonna die out here anyway," she said softly, knowing he likely wouldn't understand. "At least I won't die alone." She didn't expect an answer, but she got one. "You walk east." Her breath caught. "You speak English." He shifted slightly, pain flashing across his face. "Why you helped me?" "Because you needed it," she said. He closed his eyes. For a second, she thought she saw the ghost of a smile. Then he slipped into darkness. She stayed. Through the long night, she drifted in and out of sleep, waking at every sound. Coyotes cried in the distance. Once she thought she heard horses, but nothing came. At dawn, pale and cold, she found him watching her again. "You should go," he said, voice stronger now, though each breath cost him. "My people?" "Come." "Good," she replied. "Maybe they'll bring water this time." He almost smiled. They came at midday. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, wavering in the heat like mirages made real. Elra's stomach tightened, but she didn't run. There was nowhere to go. Instead, she stood her ground as they approached, placing herself between them and Kairo, unarmed and with no real chance of stopping anything. The lead rider was older, his face worn like old leather eyes, sharp as broken glass. He looked from Kairo to Elra and spoke in Apache. Kairo answered, voice steadier now. Elra caught her own name in the exchange. The older man studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded and swung down from his horse. Everything that followed was swift, deliberate. The man Bramholt. Kairo's uncle checked the wound, gave a low grunt of approval, then barked orders. The 2 riders, Jorvan Slate and Halek Thorn, moved quickly, building a travois, from poles securing it to a horse, lifting Kairo carefully onto it. Then Bram turned to Elra and motioned toward a horse. She hesitated. This was it. The moment she could refuse. Stay here. Die on her own terms. Or go with them. Into the unknown. But she already knew her answer. The same stubborn will that had kept her walking. That had made her save a dying stranger. Wouldn't let her stop now. She took his hand and climbed up. Kairo, that was his name. By the time they reached the Apache camp, 2 hard days riding north and west, he was strong enough to sit upright. Though every movement showed the pain still riding him. The camp was smaller than she'd imagined. Maybe 40 lodges scattered along a narrow creek, cutting through dry, rocky land. People came out to watch as they arrived, curious, wary, their eyes pressed against her like weight. Kairo spoke with Bram. Orders were given. 2 women stepped forward, Vera Sorn and Lethra Cole. They took her horse's reins without a word, guiding her away. They didn't touch her, didn't speak, just gestured. She glanced back at Kairo, but he was already being led toward a central lodge. Bram caught her look, said something low. His tone wasn't unkind. The women brought her to a lodge at the edge of camp. Inside it was cool and dim, scented with smoke and sage. They gave her water clean cold and a bowl of stew. She ate without tasting. Then they left. She slept, hours, maybe days. When she woke, Kairo stood in the doorway, framed by the afternoon light. "Come," he said. She followed. Through the camp under watchful eyes, past hushed voices that stilled as they passed. He walked stiffly, favoring his side, but his posture never bent. Proud, always proud. He led her to his lodge. She knew it was his before he even spoke. Fine horses tied nearby, weapons stacked outside, everything in its place. Inside it was clean, orderly, sparse. And something about it told her one thing clear as daylight. This was where her life was about to change. Everything inside the lodge sat in perfect order. Folded sleeping robes rested on a low wooden frame. Weapons lined the walls with quiet purpose. The fire pit in the center lay cold, untouched. Kairo stepped toward the bed and motioned for her to come closer. Elra's pulse slammed hard against her ribs. She had imagined this moment more than once, braced herself for whatever might come, told herself she would endure it because the only other choice was dying out on the open land. But now that she stood here, she couldn't move. Kairo studied her for a long second, then lowered himself onto the bed, a sharp breath slipping from him as the movement pulled at his wound. looked up his face, unreadable. "You saved my life," he said. His words came clearer now, steadier. "Out there. You could have walked away, taken my rifle, my horse. You could have ended me." "I don't kill people," Elra answered softly. "No," he said, eyes narrowing slightly as he watched her. "You are something else. Something I don't understand." He paused like he was turning over something heavy in his mind. "My people believe if someone saves your life, it belongs to them." He met her gaze. "So mine belongs to you." Elra felt a chill settle deep in her chest. "I don't want to own anyone." "Good." He gestured around the lodge, then toward himself. "Then we are the same. You saved me, so you own my life. I take yours. Now we are even." She frowned, struggling to follow. "I don't—" "You have no one here," he said. "Not harsh, just true. No husband, no family, no place. If you walk away, you die. This land does not spare those alone." He held her eyes steady. "Here. You are under my protection. No one will harm you. No one will touch you. You are safe." The word lingered between them, fragile as thin glass. "Why?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Silence stretched long. Then quietly he said, "Because you didn't have to stop." Something close to respect. "Then you leave." He nodded once. "I told you we are even. Your life is yours." But neither of them believed she would go. Not now. Maybe not ever. Where would she return to a world that had already left her behind, a life that ended beside a grave in the dirt, or step forward into something uncertain, something dangerous, something that might somehow become more than survival? She stayed. The first weeks tested her. The women in camp did not welcome her, but they did not drive her away either. They watched her, judged her. She understood why. She was white, an outsider, a stranger protected by a man of standing. She worked anyway, carried water, gathered wood, offered help wherever she could. Some women accepted it with tight expressions. Others refused her outright. Kairo remained patient. He taught her words one at a time: water, fire, horse, sky, building her understanding piece by piece. He showed her how to clean game, how to treat hides, how to move through camp without offending anyone. He never touched her unless it was to guide her hands, never stood too close, never looked at her with anything but quiet restraint. At night, he slept on the far side of the lodge. Still sometimes in the dark, she heard him shifting, restless. And she wondered if he felt it too, that strange truth hanging between them. Two people caught in something neither had chosen, trying to shape it into something they could live with. She learned about his past. Kairo had once had a wife. She died in childbirth along with their child. He had been a warrior of reputation, brave, respected, a man who had fought fiercely as white settlers pressed deeper into Apache land. He told her about the ambush, how the Ash Ridge riders struck fast, how he killed two before the arrow found him. She told him her own story, halting at first. Missouri, poverty, a marriage to Ivan Drax built on promises of something better. The long journey west, the sickness, the moment she chose to stay behind. "I couldn't leave him," she said quietly, "even if it meant dying out there." Kairo nodded once. "You stayed for him," he said one evening as they sat outside, watching the sun sink low, even after he was gone. "Yes, that is brave." She let out a small laugh. "My mother, Selavorn, would have said it was foolish." "Both can be true," he replied. He studied her for a moment. "You miss her." "Yes." She pulled her knees close. "But I can't go back. Even if I could find the way, they wouldn't understand. They'd never accept this. She gestured around them, toward him. My people do not understand either, Kairo said quietly. They think I am wrong to keep you here, that you are danger, that you will betray us, or bring sickness. He shook his head slightly. Maybe they are right. She looked at him. Maybe, he said again, but I don't think so. He met her gaze. I think you are like me, between worlds, belonging nowhere. Tears stung her eyes. I don't want that, she whispered. No one does, he said. Everything changed in late autumn. A hunting party returned with news Iron Veil cavalry had been seen 3 days east, moving north. The camp erupted into motion. Lodges came down, horses gathered, supplies packed with urgency. Elra worked alongside the others, no longer entirely an outsider. Not accepted, but no longer rejected. They moved northwest deeper into land, still held for now. The winter camp sat in a sheltered valley with grazing land and game enough to last the cold months. Elra helped Kairo raise his lodge, the work flowing easily between them now. No words needed, only the quiet understanding they had built piece by piece since the day she chose not to walk away. She had changed without noticing when it happened. Stronger now, skin darkened by sun and wind. Body lean from labor hands rough with calluses earned day by day. She learned to braid her hair the way Apache women did, to wear simple buckskin and leggings instead of the torn remains of her old dress. Somewhere along the way, she stopped being who she had been. Not white anymore. Not Apache either. Something in between. That night, their lodge stood warm against the cold air fire snapping softly in the pit. Kairo sat near the flames, cleaning his rifle with steady hands, while Elra worked over their meal. There was a rhythm to it now. Quiet, natural. And as she stirred the pot, a strange ache settled in her chest. This was what she had once imagined her life would be with Ivan Drax. A shared space, a partner beside her, something steady. But Ivan had always been distant. Even when he lived, he'd never truly been close. Kairo, this man who should have been her enemy, felt more familiar than anyone she had ever known. Something inside Elra loosened something tight and buried deep. I don't want to forget him, she said barely above a whisper. You won't. Kairo leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. But you honor him by living. By choosing to live, even when it hurts, even when dying would be easier. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted. It had been there for months, unspoken, growing in silence, but now it stood between them, undeniable. Not the wildfire of young love, something deeper, forged in hardship, in quiet understanding, in shared loss. Two broken people, finding a way to stand whole again. Kairo. She said his name unfamiliar and heavy on her tongue. But before she could finish, shouts broke through the night. Kairo was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving toward the entrance. Elra followed, heart racing. Outside, the camp stirred with urgency. People rushed toward the edge, voices sharp with tension. Riders were coming through the dusk. For a moment, fear gripped her, but then she saw it. Not Iron Veil cavalry. Apache scouts. They rode hard into camp, bringing news that changed everything. A large force of Iron Veil cavalry had set up a winter encampment 2 days to the south. They weren't passing through. They were staying. And when spring came, they would push north. The meaning was clear. Surrender or be wiped out. That night the council fire burned long. Voices rose sharp with anger, heavy with despair. Elra sat alone in Kairo's lodge, listening to it all, knowing this moment had been coming for a long time. The old life was ending. The only question left was how. Fight and die free, or surrender and survive. When Kairo returned, his face was carved from stone. "We go to the reservation," he said. Elra's chest tightened. "Not all," he added. "Some will stay. Some will fight until the end. But most of us." "We go." He sank down heavily, the weight of it pressing on him. "For the children, for the old ones. So we live, even if it is not the way we once lived." When she asked, "In the spring?" He stared into the fire. "I have lived free all my life. I hunted. I fought. I was a warrior." His voice roughened. "And now, what will I be, a beggar, a prisoner?" Elra moved closer, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "You'll be alive," she said gently. "You'll be with your people." She held his gaze. "You'll carry their stories. Teach the young. Keep what matters alive, however you can. A breath. That's not nothing." She shook her head. "That's survival." Kairo turned to her, and for a moment his composure slipped. Pain flickered in his eyes. "You understand?" he asked. "You who lost everything, who became someone new. You understand what I'm losing, yes." She reached out slowly and took his hand. His fingers were rough, worn, strong. "It doesn't make it easier," she said softly. "But life doesn't stop. We carry what we've lost. We keep going." A long silence. Then something changed in his expression. "Elra?" He said her name quieter than before, almost careful. "When we go, will you come with us?" Her heart stumbled. "Do you want me to?" He hesitated, searching. He stopped, breath-catching. "I want you to stay." His voice steadied. "I want you beside me." Another breath. "I want you to be my wife." He shook his head slightly. "Not because you owe me, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because—" He couldn't say it. He didn't need to. She saw it, felt it. Love, not simple, not easy, but real. "Yes," she said, tears spilling freely now. "Yes, I'll stay." A breath trembling. "Yes, I'll be your wife." "Yes." He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself fall into him, into something that felt for the first time like home. They held each other in the glow of the fire. Two lives bound together, two debts repaid, two souls that had found something greater than survival. Winter passed. Elra and Kairo were married in a quiet ceremony, witnessed by Bram Holt and a handful of women who had come to accept her. She moved her few belongings to his side of the lodge, and together they began something new. It wasn't easy. They argued, misunderstood each other, struggled against the differences between them. But they kept trying. Elra learned the Apache language, slowly finding her voice within it. She learned their stories, their songs, the land itself, what healed and what harmed, how to read the sky, the seasons, the signs beneath her feet. She would never truly be Apache, but she became something close enough to belong. And Kairo learned too. He learned his wife was sharp-witted and unafraid to speak her mind, that she would challenge him, question him, refuse to bend where others might. He learned she could shoot straight, stand her ground, and still show a kind of gentleness he had never known. He learned she made him laugh, made him think, made him want to be more than he had been. He came to understand something he never expected, that he loved her not in spite of who she was, but because of it. Because she forced him to see beyond the life he had always known. Because she opened doors in his mind he had never thought to walk through. When spring finally broke across the land, they rode together to the reservation. It was everything Kairo had feared. Tight, barren, watched over by men like Auric Dane agents who knew nothing of Apache ways and cared even less. Rules replaced freedom. Rations replaced hunting. Silence replaced the open land. But Elra was there beside him. So was Bram Holt, and others who had chosen to live. Even if it meant giving up everything they had been. They built a life there. Not an easy one, not a full one, but a living one. Kairo took work as a scout for the Iron Veil Cavalry, using his knowledge of the land to track the few Apache who still refused to surrender. It weighed on him. Some nights, Elra would find him sitting outside their small cabin, staring up at the stars, eyes lost somewhere far beyond the reservation, remembering what had been. But he endured. Because endurance was something they both understood now. Something they had carved into themselves through loss, through survival, through each other. Elra started a small school. She taught the children to read and write English, knowing they would need it to survive the world closing in around them. But she didn't stop there. She told them the old stories, taught them the songs, passed on everything she had learned. She wanted them to remember who they were, even as the world tried to turn them into something else. Years passed. The reservation grew crowded. Rules tightened. Freedom shrank. The great herds disappeared, hunted down until almost nothing remained. And slowly, piece by piece, the old ways faded. But Elra and Kairo held on. They built something stronger than the world around them. They had children. A daughter, first Naira Holt, then a son, Cale Holt. They raised them to stand tall, to remember, to carry both worlds inside them without shame. On quiet nights when the children slept and the work was done, Elra and Kairo would sit together in the fading light. And they would remember how it began. A dying man in a dry wash, a woman who chose to stop, a choice that changed everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Kairo asked one evening, years after that first day. "Stopping for me." Staying, Elra looked at him, at the gray now threading through his hair, at the lines carved deep into his face, at the hands that had held hers through every storm life had thrown their way. She thought of the life she had lost, and the life she had found, of who she had been, and who she had become. "No," she said simply, "not once." He smiled, the same quiet, fierce smile she had seen the first day. "We are even?" he said. She smiled back. "Yes," she said softly, "we are even." They sat together as dusk settled over the land. 2 lives bound together, 2 debts long repaid, 2 people who had found something greater than freedom, greater than safety, greater than anything they had ever known. They had found home. And in the end, that was everything. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal, para disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals narration and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.